Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. It is the morning after the Mexico City Grand Prix. What a chaotic Grand Prix that was from start to finish. Like, Austin was wild, but this was just chaos. Pure and utter chaos from start to finish. This championship has definitely heated up, and we have got 4 races left, and I think they are going to be 4 absolute bangers, just like the last 2. And I agree with Martin Brundle that the field is so tight, and that the 2025 season, before the regulation change, is going to be like an all-time classic F1 season. I think it's just going to be so good. If 2025 is like what is happening over these past 2 races plus the next 4, my God, it's going to be wild. But let's crack into Mexico because we've got a lot to discuss again. So we're going to sort of fire through all the drivers that we don't really have much to discuss because we've got quite a lot to talk about with Max and Lando yet again, Lawson, Perez, Colapinto. Like, there's a lot to discuss. So let's crack on first with Kevin Magnussen, who qualified 7th, finished 7th, and Nico Hülkenberg, who qualified 10th and finished 9th. Haas just had a good weekend. Like, they both qualified pretty well. They both qualified in Q3. And then they just kind of went under the radar in the best possible way. They were running in the points. They were kind of running within their own little race for a while, the pair of them, up until sort of Piastri started making his advance through the field towards the end of the race and kind of split them up. But they were just kind of themselves for quite a while. And were just there, causing no problems, no issues happening. There was so much chaos happening around the rest of the track that these 2 drivers that were just having a lovely Sunday drive just never got shown. We never really seen them. And they just had the perfect weekend. It's so nice to see these 2 guys just having a good weekend, scoring points, because they have had a pretty chaotic start to the year. If you think about Magnussen, and the way that they were kind of scoring points was pretty mental, with Magnussen holding everyone up and doing weird dive bombs and crazy moves and taking people out of the race. That was originally how we were getting points from Nico, and now it's just both these drivers are doing a great job and scoring points together. Amazing, absolutely amazing. It's so great to see. I'm loving this side of Haas, absolutely loving it. They've opened up the gap in the constructors. They're now 10 points ahead of RB. RB didn't score any points this weekend. So all around, I'd say a 10 out of 10 for Haas. Well done. Like, genuinely well done. It's so nice to talk about Haas this way. It's so nice. I'm loving it so much. Fantastic, fantastic work. All right, moving on to Zhou Guanyu, who qualified 20th, started 19th, finished 15th, and Valtteri Bottas, who qualified 15th, finished 14th. So Zhou Guanyu is the only driver that benefited from Esteban Ocon moving to the pits for his start, because they were both at the back of the grid. Guan Yu Zhou was 20th, Esteban Ocon 19th. That being said, it's so nice to not be talking about them being 19th and 20th. Now listen, I know we've had 3 DNFs, so I get that the actual back of the pack isn't P20, it's P17. So he's actually only 2 ahead of finishing at the back. But listen, I'll take it because I can't talk about Guan Yu Zhou just being at the back anymore. Not bad from either of them, to be honest with you, when you consider that behind them is Perez and it is Liam Lawson. And granted, Perez did finish at the actual back because he pitted for the fastest lap towards the end. But listen, I'll take it. I'll just take anything that means I'm not talking about Cyber at the very back. With Valtteri Bottas, I think if he was going to score a point, it maybe would have been in Mexico, because Mexico was just throwing up chaos left, right and centre. And it could have maybe happened. Obviously, we were getting some DNFs. Anything could have happened. At one point, I thought we could have had another DNF with the Mercedes boys. We could have had a Max and Lando DNF. Like, there could have been a few more that bumped him up the grid a little bit, but it's just nice not to talk about them at the back. It's just got to be that car, man. Like, it's got to be that car. It just can't get them anywhere close. And as I said, they didn't actually have, like, their start of the year wasn't that bad in terms of the car's performance. What let them down was having, like, mad pit stops. It's a shame for the both of them. Again, I don't think they'll score points, to be honest, this season, which is wild. Absolutely wild. And actually, I know we talk about Franco Colapinto maybe going to Sauber because it's the only seat left on the grid. The rumours of the V-Carb, we don't know what's actually coming. We don't know whether it's true or not. But with Sauber, I wouldn't want to see Colapinto. I'd love to see him on the grid, but I wouldn't want to see him at Sauber because the car's so bad. And the teams aren't going to make huge changes to their cars for 2025 because they've got to put the focus into the reg change in 2026. So I can't see the cars being massively different from what they end the year on. And it just would mean that he's in a terrible car. Like, awful, awful car. And I just don't think I could go through that. All right, next up is Liam Lawson, who qualified 12th, finished 16th. Liam said in his post-race interview that he was asked by Rachel Brooks from Sky whether or not he had any idea about if he had a seat for 2025, if he was maybe moving to Red Bull, if he was taking the V-Carb seat, if he basically had any idea. And he said, nope. He said all he can focus on right now is just the performance that he's doing on track and maximising his performance over these 6 races that he's got. And he said that he's got no idea about 2025. Nobody spoke to him about it yet. He's just waiting. And he said that performances like what happened in Mexico wouldn't help him getting a seat. And I have to say, I agree. Not the best for Lawson. Now, I'm not going to say his qualifying was terrible because I do reckon he could have gotten into Q3. He obviously missed out on a chance of actually setting another fast lap because Yuki Tsunoda crashed his car. He has come back. He had obviously a little bit of beef with Fernando in Austin. And there was, obviously, we've all seen the animated pictures of them both shouting at one another. Not shouting, but you know. And I think that's great. I think it's fabulous. I love when young drivers come in and shake up the ones that have been there for quite a while. And it's not just Fernando, it's them all. It is the Maxes and the Landos and the Charleses. And, you know, they've been in the sport now a good few years. I just love when fresh talent comes in and just isn't afraid to fight and get their elbows out and make bold, daring moves. Then we've come to Mexico and he's taken up beef with Perez. So coming into turn 4, Perez comes up the inside of Lawson, goes round. Now, I will say, Perez didn't actually leave a lot of room for Lawson. Lawson goes off the track. Lawson rejoins the track at a really tight corner. Instead of just sort of cutting the corner, which I think most of the drivers would do. It's a very similar situation to Max and Lando, where Max went up the inside and Lando cut the corner. I would say that would have been the best course of action for Lawson, rather than what Lawson did do, which was rejoin before turn 5, take that turn 5 corner and have a little bit of a love tap with Perez, which meant that Perez had side pod damage. So he's damaged Perez's car. Yeah, not great, to be honest with you. Not great. And, like, I understand what Lawson was doing. He was trying to retain his position without having to, you know, potentially be given penalties for leaving the track and gaining the advantage. I get it. But all that he's done is pissed off Perez, damaged Perez's car, and effectively ruined Perez's race. Because after that point, Perez pitted a few laps later and just never really got the performance back. And he was running a pretty decent race, was Sergio Perez. Now, from what I've gathered, Lawson was called to Christian Horner's office after the race because Horner wasn't happy with Lawson's attitude and behaviour towards Checo, which I can kind of get. I understand, listen, you don't want your drivers fighting within your teams, because Red Bull have 2 teams, because why wouldn't they? You don't want them obviously fighting within the team to an extent where there's damage and stuff like that. But it's a wild one. Perez didn't have anything nice to say about Lawson. He said, I don't have any relationship with him. I don't think he's... What was it he said? Perez said, I don't have any relationship with him. The way he's come into Formula One, I don't think he has the right attitude for it. He needs to be a bit more humble. When a 2-time world champion was saying things last weekend, he completely ignored him. That 2-time world champion being Fernando Alonso. I think this is going to be an ongoing spat, to be honest with you. And obviously Perez is upset. He's just had a terrible home Grand Prix, and he's probably fighting for his job. So listen, I get it. In terms of the incident, I would say Lawson is 60% to blame. Perez is 40%. That 40% is Perez not leaving Lawson enough room. The 60% is Lawson not taking the initiative to rejoin the track in a different manner. The damage to Perez could have been avoided. Lawson could have cut the corner, given the place to Perez, and then gone and fought and got it back. Like, let's do these things in a proper way, and we'll come on to talk about this a bit more when we come on to talk about Max and Lando. So yeah, that is everything from Liam Lawson. Not a great weekend for him, and not a weekend that will aid in his getting a seat for next year. And next up is Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified 11th, did not finish. Oh, Yuki, so unfortunate, so unfortunate. No, like it's just a get off the line incident. It's what happens. We jumble all these cars up. They all start at the same time. It's a long run down to turn 1. There's mad slipstreams going on all over the gaff. There's drivers attempting to make moves, and it's such an area where you can gain so much and lose so much at the same time, and Yuki just lost so much. He was gaining on Albon, he was pretty much past Albon, and unfortunately he was on the outside. Albon was in the middle and Gasly was on the inside. Gasly just kind of moved in a little bit to Albon, which obviously pushed Albon over, and Albon got squeezed and just clipped. I think it was Yuki's right rear caught Albon's front left, and it just sent Yuki into the barriers, spun him round, and he was off at turn 1. Well, he was off obviously before turn 1, but he skidded off at turn 1 and was into the barrier, ended his race, and not his fault, not really Albon's fault, not really Gasly's fault. It's just, it's a lap 1 racing incident, unfortunately. It's a get off the line race start incident. We see them happen, it happens all the time. Happens all the time, especially when you've got something like a track like Mexico, where it is such a long run and then such a tight right-hander. It's a shame. I feel for him. I've not really got much more to say, to be honest with you. It's a bad weekend for both VCARB drivers. Both of them not in the points. Obviously, Yuki DNFing, they're going to have to do some work to that car. They'd obviously just done work to the car, so not great for the cost cap. I don't know. I think they've been all right for crashes this year, have they not? I don't think they've had any real bad crashes. Like Perez has had a bad crash. Magnussen's had a bad crash. It's not ideal for them. As I've said earlier on, Haas has just sort of pulled away a little bit from them in the constructors. And I actually said in my predictions, I think it was, that I don't think that they'd be able to catch Aston Martin. But actually, anything could happen. Anything could happen. The fact that both the Aston Martin boys didn't finish in the points as well, Haas could catch them if they've got 2 point-scoring drivers. Anyway, moving on to Franco Colapinto, who qualified 16th, finished 12th. Colapinto was running a fairly all-right race to begin with. He'd gotten himself up into the points. He went a crazy amount of time on those hard tyres. What did he do? I wrote it down. 48 laps on those initial hard tyres. And to be fair, you could see that it was beginning to affect him a little bit because he was losing quite a few positions towards the end. A lot of the cars around him had fresher tyres. They were able to overtake him a lot easier. He did complain that his steering was a bit off. It was going soft and then quite stiff, back to soft again. So it was meaning the car was moving around quite a lot. I have to say, I think Colapinto is one of those drivers that can handle a car that kind of moves around a lot. He seems to be, I wouldn't say he likes it, but he seems to be able to handle that quite well. Then later on in the race, it came to, we got a little bit of a battle between Lawson and Colapinto. Colapinto went to get the overtake done on Lawson into, I think it was turn 1. He went round the outside, wasn't left enough space, kind of went off the track. Very similar to Liam Lawson, and Perez didn't rejoin the track in the ideal place. Again, should have probably cut the corner and then given the place back if he needed to. He rejoined in an unsafe manner, I would actually say, and broke Lawson's front wing end plate, which effectively ruined his race and why he finished P16. So not great from Colapinto there. He was also then given a 10-second penalty after the race, which was added to his elapsed time for his collision with Lawson. So his point scoring streak, has he scored points in every race he's done? I'd say this is Colapinto's worst race, to be honest with you, and not great. I say I expect better, but he's just young. He's a young boy in an F1 car. Everyone's done the same thing. Come on. All right, moving on to Alex Albon, who qualified 9th, did not finish. As I said when I was talking about Yuki, Albon just kind of got caught up in the sort of starting chaos, got squeezed, had Gasly on one side, Yuki on the other. He clipped Yuki, ended Yuki's race, and it actually ended his own. He, coming into turn 2, you could see he was basically off the track. His tyre was rolling around, and they basically were like, just pull over the car where it's safe, please. So he was out of the race. It also caused a safety car because they had to get the cranes out to remove both of the cars off the track. So, God, 2 safety cars. 2 safety cars in 2 weeks. So, yeah, not a great race from Albon. Not a great race from Williams, to be honest with you. They are still ahead of Alpine in the Constructors, but really a weekend that they would have been wanting to score some points and kind of, you know, they could have maybe scored points and closed the gap to RB. Just not great, and not great for a team like Williams that does kind of suffer with the sort of monetary aspect of it and the cost cap and stuff like that, and they can't afford to make a lot of the parts that some of the other teams can. It's obviously plagued them quite a bit this year. So, all right, Pierre Gasly qualified 8th, finished 10th. I'd say Gasly was just kind of another driver that was just kind of running an all right race that you didn't really see a lot of. He was just kind of there, going about his business, doing what he needed to do, scored a point. And I don't think Alpine could really ask for more than that. I don't think he could have gotten higher up the grid. I think what he did is the best that he could do, and that's grand. I don't really remember seeing Gasly, to be honest with you. And do you know what? Fair enough. It's the same as the Haas boys. A decent weekend from him. Well done. I don't know what's happening with Gasly at the moment and the Alpine, because Gasly's actually having a pretty decent performance, whereas Esteban's not. Has like Gasly got upgrades or something on his car that Esteban doesn't? I don't know, but he's doing all right. The Alpine doesn't seem to be that much of a tractor. I mean, he has mowed the lawn a few times this weekend, don't get me wrong, but these past 2 weeks he's done a pretty decent job. So well done to Gasly for that. Hopefully he can keep it up and get some more points scored. He's currently 9th. Sorry, that's a complete lie. He's currently 16th with 9 points in the driver's standings. So hopefully he can get a few more points in the bag and get past Daniel Ricciardo at least. I mean, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? Yeah, fairly all right. Well done, Gasly. Moving on to his teammate Esteban Ocon, who qualified 19th, started from the pit lane, finished 13th. So Esteban had a pit lane start because he took a new power unit, took new elements to his power unit, which meant he broke Parc Fermé. And it's just the regulations, start from the pit lane. Never really managed to recover, did he? Didn't really manage to make doesn't really manage to make an impression at all, really. I think the only reason he's finished 13th and not lower is because, well, I mean, the two behind him is the two Cybers, so you would kind of expect Ocon to be ahead of the two Cybers. And then Lawson and Sergio Perez, who both had very late pit stops. So it's the only reason he's finished where he's finished. And that's all I've got to say about Esteban. I wonder what it is that's actually causing the gap between them and why, listen, I know it's like 3 positions, but why Pierre is finishing in the points and Esteban's not, and why Esteban was out in Q3 and Gasly wasn't. And listen, I know Mexico's like a rogue track. It throws up bits of chaos here and there, and there's people going out where you wouldn't expect them. I mean, just look at Piastri, but interesting. Very, very interesting. All right, moving on to Lance Stroll, who qualified 14th, finished 11th. Kind of a missed weekend for Stroll, just kind of floating around. I think his teammate kind of took a lot of the attention, obviously it being his 400th race. I think we were all kind of gearing for Alonso points. And I mean, all my attention in the Aston Martin team was going towards Fernando Alonso. It does, to be fair, most weekends. Stroll, yeah, was there. He started the race. He finished the race. He had a little bit of a run-in with Perez. Same kind of deal as Perez v Lawson. Coming up to sort of turn 4, Perez on the inside ran Stroll off the track. I just don't understand how that wasn't a penalty. And I'll talk about it a bit more when we come to actually talk about Perez, because we've got so much to talk about with Perez. But I just don't understand how Perez didn't get a penalty for that incident. I can see why he didn't with Lawson, but I don't understand how he didn't with Stroll. I'd say the full blame is on Perez for that one. He didn't leave Stroll enough space, ran him off the track. Unfortunate for Stroll. That's all I've really got to say, to be honest with you. Thankfully, no damage. Thankfully, no penalties for Stroll for gaining an advantage. I think he just conceded the place pretty easily, but shame, to be honest. But even more of a shame for his teammate. And it just gets worse. Fernando Alonso, who qualified 13th, did not finish. Oh, Fernando, what a horrible, horrible end to his 400th race weekend. What an insane achievement to get to 400 races and for it to end that way through no fault of your own. It's not like, he had a big crash or anything like that. He literally had a brake issue. His 400th start was ruined by a brake issue related to the cooling. I just feel so bad for him. In all seriousness, the only other person right now that would come close to that is Hamilton, who I believe is on 300. Do we genuinely think Hamilton will actually make it to 400 races? Because it's another 2-3 years? Maybe. He might do. How many drivers actually are going to make that landmark amount of races? Not many, to be honest. I think Fernando's obviously the first one, and then we've got maybe Hamilton. I can't really see many of the other drivers getting that far. There's not going to be many times to celebrate a driver's 400th race, and it's such a bloody shame that it ended that way. I actually feel for him. I feel so bad for him. Oh, what a shame. Not much else to say, really. And next up, Oscar Piastri, who qualified 17th, finished 8th. Can I just say, at the end of the day, absolutely incredible work from Piastri to move through the field like that. Absolutely incredible. I was worried that he would maybe get stuck or just wouldn't be able to do it. It's always a worry you have. And he just bided his time, managed his tyres, did what he needed to do, got the overtakes done, and managed to get into the points. And honestly, just even getting into the points is a huge achievement to get through a field in a Grand Prix like Mexico, let's be honest with you. He was put under a bit of pressure towards the end. There was all the sort of expectation for him to go and catch Max. He just couldn't get close to Max, couldn't really, You couldn't really get up behind Magnussen to get the overtake done on him. He was defending against Hamilton for quite a while. I mean, it is what it is. It's not a bad race at all. It's just a blip for him, to be honest with you. It's a blip. And did he have a bit of a blip in Austin as well? This is probably his worst weekend this year. It's his first race this year that's not a Q3 appearance. He's finished in the low points, but still a great result. I would be happy with that, but then I'm also not an F1 driver who is obviously one half of a team fighting for a Constructors' Championship. And next up is Lando Norris, who qualified third, finished second. Oh, Lando and Max, eh? Lando and Max. Here we are, once again, talking about a little spat that these two had on the racetrack. We talked about it in Austin. We talked about it in Austria. Thankfully, no damage. However, we did get some penalties. This time towards Max, not towards Lando. So by this time in the race, Sainz has managed to get ahead of Max. Lando is the next driver up. Charles Leclerc is behind Lando. Coming into turn 4, Lando goes ahead on the outside of turn 4. Max brakes late, which forces Lando off the track. Lando cuts turn 5. Gets ahead of Sainz, but actually gives the place back. And we are all sat there at this point thinking Lando's going to have to give that place back to Max. He's going to have to give that place back to Max because he has left the track and gained the advantage. This is the same thing we're talking about in Austin, sorry. This is the exact same situation that we were talking about in Austin, going to be controversial because Max is forcing Lando off the track. Lando is then obviously off the track, has gotten ahead of Max, and it's the age-old question of who is actually to blame here. Is Max to blame for not leaving him enough room and forcing him off, or is Lando to blame for just getting ahead of Max and keeping the position? Both could be wrong, to be honest with you. But then it's how do you solve that issue? Does Lando give the place up? Do both the drivers get penalties? Yeah, it's just like, does Lando give the place up and Max gets a penalty? Does Lando get to keep the position and he gets a penalty? Do both the drivers get a penalty? Like, there's just, it's so confusing. Coming then down towards turn 8, it kind of looked as if Lando was maybe going to give the position back to Max. That's what it kind of looked like at first, because it almost looked as if he'd slowed down to let Max pass. Oh, but then Max just went off the rails and came down the inside of towards turn 8, dive bombed Lando, forced both the drivers off the track, opened the door massively to let Charles Leclerc clean through. He jumped both the drivers and took second, and off him and Sainz went. And I just think, what are you doing? Like, in all seriousness, I just think, what are you playing at, Max? What is this issue about? What are you doing? Lando then obviously came onto the radio. Max got penalties for it. And, like, I'm with Lando on turn 8. I'm like, slam dunk, Max should be getting a penalty for that. I agree with Lando in every sense of the word. The turn 4 incident, again, it could be anybody. It could be both of them. It could be Max for forcing Lando off the track. It could be Lando for leaving the track and gaining the advantage. It could be Lando giving the position back, Max getting a penalty. It could be Lando getting a penalty but being able to keep the position. It could be any number of things that happen, and like, it's just gotta stop. Like, the Perez, what, like, just like, I know we are like, let them race, and I'm 100% let them race, but unfortunately that's not what we do. We say let them race, the drivers say let us race, and then they race, and then they whine over the radios about one another. The pair of them are bad enough for it. They whine over the radios. It then has to go to the stewards, and then the stewards start handing out penalties, and at the end of the day, one driver's not going to be happy, and this time it was Max. I want them to fight, but we'll talk about Max a little bit more when we come on to him, but like, he just sees red. It's just a bit of like red mist that comes over him. So that like turn 8 incident should just never have happened, and it's just getting annoying, to be honest with you. The only other bit for Lando was him getting P2. For a while, it did look like he would come home P3. He was slowly gaining on Charles Leclerc, and Sainz was kind of coming over the radio being like, no, we need to stop pushing as a team. We need to stop pushing because we need to kind of like save our tires towards the end of the race. And I just don't think he realised how close Lando actually was to Charles Leclerc. Like, Charles Leclerc couldn't really slow down because it was just going to open him up to having Lando just get the overtake done. And Lando was gaining on him enough as it was. It's a shame that we didn't really get a bit of a battle between those two, Leclerc and Lando, because Leclerc coming out that final corner just sort of lost the rear of the car, nearly crashed, very nearly crashed, and Lando just managed to sail on past, and Lando then couldn't really get up behind Sainz for a little Car-Lando fight. But very good job for Lando Norris, to be honest with you. He has closed the gap to Max by 10 points now. He is now only he's 47 points behind Max now in the championship. So, like, championship back on? Like, I was kind of saying championship over for the drivers because it just looked like Lando would never be able to actually close the gap to Max. But now is it championship back on? We've got 4 races and 2 sprints left. Like, it could be he could make some decent points up. So, yeah, well done. Well done, Lando Norris. And moving on to Carlos Sainz, who qualified first, finished first. He did lose the lead coming into turn 1. Max just had a better start, to be honest with you, and just managed to get the job done before turn 1. Sainz did cut turn 2 to get in front of him, but he did then give the position back. It was just, he ran out of room on the track, to be honest with you. So I understand why he did it, and I'm glad he gave the position back. He then just bided his time, did a couple of laps, then got that DRS, and it's mighty, that DRS effect. The DRS and the slipstream, although it doesn't actually work as well in Mexico due to the altitude, it works fucking beautifully, to be honest with you, because you can just see how quickly how much of a benefit it is to the drivers. And he managed to get the lead again, and once he got the lead, he just kind of sailed away into the sunset. It was a beautiful drive from Sainz, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy. He even said after the race, he was like, this means a lot to me because obviously Mexico, it feels like home, it's Spanish speaking, all that kind of stuff, and he said he wanted to win this race in his final year with Ferrari, and I feel devastated for him because there's that clip of him after qualifying where he talks and he's like, I've for the past 4 years really worked hard at getting this team back up to being championship contenders, and it looks like next year they could be a championship fighting car, and I'm gutted that I'm not going to be able to reap the benefit of my hard work because I'm leaving. And you can tell he's just gutted by it. He is gutted by it, and I feel for him. He's said that all he wants to do is just get on the podium as much as he can because he knows he's not going to be able to fight for podiums next year. We don't know how good the Williams car will be next year. It could be capable of fighting for... I think he will struggle to readjust his mindset from fighting for wins and podiums to fighting for P9, P10. I'm a bit sad for him. It's bittersweet. It is bittersweet, him getting this win. And as much as I would love him to win a few more races this year, I kind of need Charles Leclerc to win because I really want him to get second in the championship. I really want him to get second in the championship. But love you, Sainz. Well done. Talking of Charles Leclerc, who qualified 4th, finished 3rd. As I said, Leclerc just, benefited beautifully from Max and Lando scrapping. He just managed to get right in. They opened the door for him beautifully. He took the advantage, sailed on past them, and it looked like we were going to get Ferrari 1-2 for a while. Unfortunately, Lando was just there at the right time for Leclerc slipping. His rear tyres were gone. He'd lost the grip on them. Very, very good save from Leclerc not to have crashed into the barrier because it did look like he could, to be fair. So beautiful save from him. And nice little tactic from Ferrari. They'd built over a 30-second gap to George Russell, who was 4th. So they pitted Leclerc, stuck on a pair of fresh boots, and he managed to steal the fastest lap away from Lando, Red Bull did think to do the same. They stuck Perez in the pits to stick some softs on to try and just steal that point away. Not that he would have gotten the point because he was outside of the top 10, but nobody getting a point is better than somebody else getting a point. And I'm loving this little three-way fight we've got in the constructors at the moment because they're all just kind of there. Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren. It's great to see. I'm loving it. And I agree with what Martin Brundle was saying when we were talking about the fastest lap. I can't believe they're taking that point away next year because it just adds a bit of cat and mouse to the end of a Grand Prix when, you know, a lot of the times right now when we come to the last few laps, whoever's winning has already basically won. Do you know what I mean? Like they either nobody can catch them or, you know, they've just secured their win with a few laps to go. And unless something mental happens, they're probably going to win it. And I just love this little cat and mouse game. Like I love the fact that we had Leclerc and Perez both pitting to get fastest lap. Like I love that. I love that we had Esteban pitting, what was it, last week to get the fastest lap away from Colapinto. I love the little games and I love as I said, I love the cat and mouse of it all. So I'm with Martin Brundle. I think it's mental that they're taking away the point for fastest lap. So yeah, well done to Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc coming home first and third. Leclerc with a wee fastest lap. It means that Ferrari have moved up in the constructors. Ferrari is now second in the constructors standings with a grand total of 537 points. Championship is back on for the constructors. It is a three-way fight for that. McLaren have got 566, Ferrari 537, and Red Bull have 512. As I said, we've got 4 races and 2 sprints to go, so that Constructors' Championship is anyone's. It is literally anyone's, and I cannot wait to see what happens. It could be any of the 3 of them, and I love that we've got 4 races to go, and it's this close in the Constructors. I just love it so much. I think it will go down to the wire. I think it will be decided in Abu Dhabi, and after Constructors was decided in Japan last year. Was it Japan? Or was Japan the drivers? I can't remember, but it was decided very early. It's so nice to see the battles happening this late on in the year. I've missed it. All right, moving on to George Russell, who qualified 5th, finished 5th, and Lewis Hamilton, who qualified 6th, finished 4th. I love when the Mercedes boys are told they are free to race. I love it because they just race each other pretty hard, but are also a little bit respectful of, like, let's not do anything stupid and damage the cars. So we got some beautiful racing between Russell and Hamilton. Hamilton just could not catch Russell. Like lap after lap after lap went past. And you could see him just coming down the pitch straight, getting that DRS, getting that slipstream, and just not being able to make a move. It felt like it went on for like 12 laps. Genuinely. Hamilton just wasn't able to get onto the back of Russell. He just could not catch him. And mental because Russell was running an old spec. Like they had to change after his crash in FP2. So he was running a Silverstone spec. And I was making me think, like, is the aero package on the Silverstone spec better than what we've got in the Mexico spec? Just because it's the most up-to-date car. Food for thought. Russell was very open over the sort of press conference at the end in the media pen where he was like, no, he's like, I'm fully confident all the upgrades seem to be working as they should be on Lewis's car, and I'm not, you know, opposed to getting them when we go to getting them stuck back on when we go to Brazil. So there's that. As I said, Hamilton just took ages to try and get the move done. He did manage, got a little bit of DRS, got through Russell. That was all she wrote. They came home P4, P5. Well done, boys. Well done, Mercedes. As I say, fantastic job from Russell to be running that old a spec a car and performing the way he did. Moving on to Sergio Perez, who qualified 18th, finished 17th. Perez had a fantastic start to the Grand Prix. He was up 5 places, made it up into 13th. He was noted for a false start. Wasn't actually a false start, but he was a mile ahead of his pit box. Oh my God. He was so far ahead of the pit box. It was unreal. So far ahead on the grid. And they were like, okay, potential false start. And he was like, I had a great start. What are you talking about? And then they were like, okay, it's not a false start. You were actually ahead on the grid in your pit box. And he was like, nah, get them to check. I wasn't. And how anybody could argue that he wasn't ahead is wild, because he was so far ahead of the yellow line on the grid. My God, Perez. So that gave him a 5-second penalty. He then, obviously, as I said, had his little spats with Liam Lawson and Lance Stroll. As I said, with the Liam Lawson incident, I put 40% of the blame on Perez, 60% of it on Liam Lawson. Did obviously cause him some side pod damage. He then did the same move on Lance Stroll, which forced Lance off the track. Now, when we were looking at Max and Lando, Max wasn't the one trying to get the overtake done on Lando, to be fair. Lando was getting the overtake done on Max, but Max still pushed him off the track. And Max got a penalty for it. So why didn't Perez get a penalty for his incident with Lance Stroll? I'm just saying, if we are talking about consistency with the stewarding decisions, Perez should have gotten a penalty for forcing Lance Stroll off the track. I'm fine with him not getting a penalty for the Lawson incident, because as I said, I don't put the majority of the blame on him. I put the majority of the blame onto Lawson, but he forced Lance Stroll off the track. He should have been given a penalty, and how he didn't, I don't understand. He then came into the pits to serve his penalty. He got a little bit of a change to his front wing, and his just race was ruined. He lost any sort of decent performance he had. I think the side pod damage was a little bit more than what it looked like, and he just lost out. He just couldn't get high up the grid at all. Towards the end, obviously, they pitted him to stick on some fresh boots to see if he could go for the fastest lap and steal it away from Norris, and, to be fair, steal it away from Ferrari. He and Leclerc both had completely clear laps to get it done, but Perez just wasn't quick enough. Wasn't fast enough to get the fastest lap. As I said before, with some of that's all she wrote. And I'm going to say that my prediction of a Perez disaster class came true. It came true. Perez had an absolutely shocking weekend. Shocking qualifying, punted in Q1. Terrible start to the race because he got a 5-second penalty for his grid spot. Picked up some side pod damage. Should have been given another penalty for forcing Lance Stroll off the track. Couldn't get a fastest lap and came home plumb last. Now listen, I know that he's last because they pitted him towards the very end of the race, but I'm counting it. Perez disaster class. Tick, done. I feel bad for him as well because it's his home race, and his dad's like coming out and saying like, you know, you've not seen the real Perez yet. He will be a world champion. And then you've got Helmut Marko coming out and saying, you know, it's really sweet that your father, that, you know, you've got faith in your son, but he won't be. Marco's just brutal, but yeah, not great for Perez in front of his home crowd, and you can tell the Mexicans are devastated for him. Oh, God. And finally, Max Verstappen, who qualified second, finished sixth. Verstappen, obviously, as I said, took the lead very early on, but just that DRS from Sainz, just he couldn't retain the lead, and once Sainz was in front of him, Sainz just kind of sailed off into the distance. Max was complaining that he had no battery, no energy in his battery, and I was like, oh, is this going to cause some issues? And I don't know, they must have managed to get it fixed. And then there was obviously the incident with Lando. Obviously, Lando coming up the outside of turn 4, Max forced him off. Turn 4, I don't see it being the huge problem out of that fight. It's turn 8. Why Max Verstappen decided to dive bomb Lando into turn 8, both forcing Lando off the track, him going off the track, and I just don't understand it. So for the turn 4 incident, Max got a 10-second penalty for forcing Lando off the track. So I'm saying Perez should have got the same for Lance Stroll. He then got another 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage because he was overtaking Lando and left the track and got ahead of Lando off track. I just think it's mental. Absolutely mental that Max pulled a move like that. And then when GP comes over the radio and says, by the way, you've been given a 10-second penalty, And he's like, oh, that's interesting. And then he's back over again and he's like, oh, you've been given another 10-second penalty. He's like, that's just silly. I wouldn't call it silly, Max. I'd call it you being an absolute maniac. There was no need for that move at turn 8. Absolutely no need for the move at turn 8. I want to see them race, but I want to see them race cleanly. I don't want the dirty moves and all that kind of stuff. I just don't want it. It's not the racing I signed up for. I want clean racing. I was asleep, actually, to be fair, when this came out, but Max was given two penalty points for forcing Lando off the track at turn 4. How did the penalty points come for turn 4 and not turn 8? That's what I want to know. Because I would definitely say the turn 8 incident is worse than the turn 4 incident. Max then obviously pitted and he was quite far down, and he basically, when he came out of the pits, it was a net 6. 6th was the best he could get and he finished 6th, because once he got to 6th, he just didn't have the pace to catch the 2 Mercedes drivers in front of him. He didn't have the pace to catch George and Lewis. And he's lucky that Oscar couldn't catch him, to be honest with you. So I just think that the whole incident between Max and Lando, this is the second time running and the second race in a row that we're talking about an incident like this. And I'm sorry, but Max deserved his penalties. And I do think the penalty point should have been for turn 8, not turn 4. I definitely think turn 8 was the worst of the 2 incidents. So yeah, that is us from a eventful Mexican Grand Prix. As I said, Ferrari have now overtaken Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship standings. And there is 47 points between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. So, we've got 47 points between our championship contenders, 4 races and 2 sprints left. How do you guys think this is going to finish? I want to hear what you guys think. Drop your thoughts down below in the comments. I want to know what you guys think is going to happen. How do you think this championship is going to finish? As I said, leave me your thoughts in the comments. DM me on social media, Parc Fermé Parlay on Threads, Instagram. Make sure you follow along on there as well. We live post throughout the Grand Prix with all updates over on Threads. And we post a lot of content over on Instagram and TikTok as well, at Parc Fermé Parlay. I also put the question to Threads and said, how do you think this is going to finish? There's 47 points, 4 races, 2 sprints. How do you guys think it finishes? Here are some of the replies. Owen de Young 00 said, I think those 6 points are going to come back and haunt Lando. MK_SCO3 said, to be honest, if the Red Bull isn't making progress and stays on this level, then Lando could still turn it around. Today was definitely important to keep it more realistic. On Sky Germany, they also said the motor change is almost inevitable, so Lando can definitely do it. That motor change is a comment coming from Helmut Marko that says that Verstappen will probably take an engine penalty over the next 4 races, probably in Brazil. Frank Peters 67 said McLaren are going to regret papaya rules. Jackals_Insta said Max Verstappen 4-time world champion. SingSuk007 said Norris hasn't got the temperament to finish him off. Way too many mistakes and isn't elite level in my honest opinion. Only Lewis has went toe to toe with Verstappen. And then Vanessa124125 said, think Max will win as he's more ruthless, so will do anything. Lando is more prone to mistakes. Is he not used to the pressure yet? Personally, I'd like to see Lando win so we get a new car and a new driver champion. My unrealistic wish would be Leclerc to catch them both, but can't see that happening so late on. I agree with you, Vanessa. I would love Leclerc to catch him as well, but again, I don't think that is going to happen. I am settling for a Leclerc P2. Can Lando do it? I definitely think so, but we'll just have to wait and see. I definitely think Ferrari is on to win the Constructors. They definitely seem like the car to beat right now. They 100% seem like the car to beat. They are fast. Their race pace is incredible. And it's actually one of the only times I think I'd agree with Danica Patrick, where in 2023, that car was qualified, the Ferrari car was qualifying amazingly, but the race pace was terrible. I would happily suffer ever so slightly more in qualifying for a better race pace. I would happily be a little bit slower in qualifying and have a better race pace. And I think that's what Ferrari has now this year. They aren't qualifying as well, but they are racing so much better. So it's great to see. And that is everything from us from a chaotic, eventful Mexico City Grand Prix. Next up this week is the final of our triple header through the Americas, and we are off to Sao Paulo in Brazil. So it is a sprint weekend, I believe. Yeah, it is. It's a sprint weekend this weekend. And then we've got 2 weeks off, and then we've got our final triple header with Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. So that is everything from us. We will be back with our predictions later on this week for Sao Paulo. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. Enjoy your week, and I will see you later. I love you. Bye.